All right, so we're going to take some time to really compare and contrast three scales and three different sets of sounds, or even swaras, right? So we've been talking a little bit about Carnatic music in previous lessons. We're going to really dive into the differences and similarities between the major scale or Ionian mode, the Aeolian mode, or natural minor scale, and then one of the Carnatic music has a lot of different components that use different language, but we're going to reference one Carnatic scale, and you'll get to hear those sounds and see how they're constructed and what different types of energies these note relationships or swaras have with one another. And please forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology. I'm very novice in this in the Eastern music discipline. I'm learning, and I'm certainly no expert. Just trying to kind of bridge some connections for my students. So let's get started. The first thing I want to have you pay attention to is just simply this diagram here, and you'll notice. All right, we've got the piano, right? And then we have this grand staff, okay? And in that grand staff, you'll see that we have a treble clef here, right? Treble clef, and then we have a bass clef. And these are connected with this middle C, which is the middle C that you would see on the piano, which is this key right here. And what I like about this diagram is it kind of relates the grand staff to the piano keyboard. And this is kind of how it relates. As you go up on the keyboard or to your right, you would get higher pitches and consequently lower pitches if you go to the left side, right? High and low. And then here's that middle C. You can see this on the diagram as well. And you can see how this is one ledger line below and one ledger line above, but they're really the same exact note. And they bridge the bass clef and the treble clef. If you wanted to bridge this another way, you might see what we call a alto clef, and this is C, where C is, and this is also a movable clef, and sometimes it's referred to as tenor clef as well. But it's known as a C clef because right here in the middle is where C would be, and so if you can think about it, the C clef, that would be C, and then its next two lines would be here, and the next bottom two lines would be here, and you'd get a staff out of that. Okay. And this is just to help with different ranges and timbres of music. All right. So now let's get to this C major scale. In C major scale, we have the combination of whole steps and half steps is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And you see that here, two half steps equal a whole step. So C, D sharp, right? Or C sharp, D. That's one whole step. D, D sharp, E. That's two whole steps. And here there's no black key. So there's a half step here. So this is whole, whole, half. And in the same process, whole, 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 half. And that's what creates that pattern. And that's what creates this sound, right? And, gotta wait for my piano to get pulled up here. There we go. I'm going to turn on organ. So there's a little bit more sustain. Right. And in that, we get different harmonies. So if harmonies are usually built off of every other note, call these triads, right? And when you play these in different patterns, right, that's one of the most common chord progressions we have, this 1-4-5-1. And that chord progression is a result of where those half steps and whole steps are in different orders. Okay. And each note has a end chord. It's not coincidental that I guess there are things that are more pleasing to our ears and why there are more common chord progressions, etc. And it's because of the relationships of these whole steps and half steps and the impact they have on one another. And one thing that I like to think about is having resting tones, yielding tones, traveling tones, and uh, you know, leading tones. Okay. So if we were to talk about resting tones, think about a street light. Well, you would have, if you had a red light, that means that's a starting and ending spot, right? And maybe it's temporary, but in the end, you have to stop at a red light. So you're resting, resting, resting. And then there are times where we come across that yellow that yellow a yellow light, right? And we're yielding to that sign. And so this note here, the fifth scale degree, kind of has that. And then there are times where we have a direction that we're definitely headed, and sometimes there's only one way to go, right? And so I want you to think of this as green or go, right? The yellow as yield, meaning you might be temporarily stopped there. You might slow down. You might have to speed through. It just depends. And then we kind of have these traveling notes, all right, that kind of get us to one way or the other, right? So let's listen to that again. And I'm going to give you a good example here. So I'm going to add a drone. Okay, so I'm going to hold the tonic, scale degree 1. We're yielding. That's that fifth scale degree. And it wants to go back to that resting tone. Again, we can rest there, but it doesn't always sound complete. Kind of wants to go here, okay? The leading tone has a very, very intense energy and wants us to go directly to a certain note. It's really pushing our ears. It wants to go here. All right, I'll do that same lead in up to this note, but then I'll resolve it down, and I'll let you answer the question for yourself. Does it seem right? I'm not saying it's wrong, but does it seem right? Falls down, but it wants to go here. Again, it's not a rule, right? But it wants to go here naturally. So let's listen to this. I can pause there. That's pretty nice. This note kind of wants to fall down too. Okay. That kind of wants to fall down. You can go up there too. That sounds fine. And even this. So none of this is accidental, right? But as soon as we start to alter where these half steps exist, all right, we start to get different sounds and different pulls and different pushes with the music to create different tensions, which create then different resolves. So let's take a look at now the Aeolian minor scale. Okay, now the natural minor scale, or the Aeolian mode is related to the sixth scale degree. And without being too complicated, I'm going to pull my keyboard just so you can see. If I use all those same keys, all the white keys, okay, but I start on the sixth scale degree, that's a minor chord, and this is a minor tonality, okay? Meaning, if we start on the sixth scale degree, we're going to come up with a different set of where the whole steps and half steps are. If we imply that same whole step and half note pattern that we get from what I just played, you get what is a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. Now that's different from a major scale. Remember, our major scale had a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. This is major, okay, and this is minor. So you can see how those whole steps interact with the half steps, right? And here, we don't have a half step to end our phrase. We have a whole step. So it's going to have different energies. And you can see that I've labeled that here. So we've got a whole step to a half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. Okay. Now let's listen to this natural minor scale. Okay. And you'll notice one thing also, using that whole steps and half steps, we call this a parallel minor because I'm starting on the same pitch that we did above on our C major scale, meaning we're starting on C. Our resting notes are still the same resting notes. Our yielding note is going to be the same. It's this G. But what about, does our leading tone still have the same, is it in the same spot? And the answer is no. So we're going to hear a different energy with that. So let's see what happens. Okay, let's pull up our keyboard. And here's a natural minor scale. Again, that fifth. Okay, those have the same relationship as our major scale. But instead of having this T-do, we have a... Does not have the same energy as this. Sorry. And therefore, not to get into too much of this, but if we remember from some previous lessons, composers or musicians said, well, I really like that leading tone, but I also want to hear this sound, right? Okay. So they said, well, let's just add a leading tone. They called that the harmonic minor scale because they wanted to create new, different harmonies, right? Again, I don't want to digress, but that's how that interacts. But regardless, in a natural minor scale, we have this sound again. Okay, and so therefore, energy is different. We're going to come up with different tonalities, different chord progressions that serve one another, but in different ways, which add variety, which is great, right? And then we get to this Carnatic scale, which is really, really cool. Okay, here you'll see that the whole steps and the half steps are different, but we don't have 4 whole steps anymore. We have a whole step, whole step, whole step. We have 3 whole steps. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3 half steps. And then we have this thing called an augmented second. Almost forgot how to spell it. Augmented second, which is the same interval as a minor third. It sounds the same, but it's spelled as a second because it's a second scale degree. And you'll see here we've got this to this is a half step. Okay. And then this note to this note, we have 1 half step, 2, 3, which is a minor third or augmented second. Okay. All that's one and the same. It sounds the same, just spelled differently, like deer and deer, D-E-E-R, D-E-A-R. And then we have a half step. And then we have a whole step because we skip a black key. And then we have another half step. We go straight to the next black key, another whole step, right? And then another whole step. And that creates this type of sound. Let me pull up the piano. cool sound. And what's neat about that is, right, we've lowered the second scale degree. Instead of playing this, think of C major scale, C, D. Here we have C, C sharp or D flat, and harmonic. In a C major scale, we have C, D, E natural. Here we have C, D flat, E, and you can hear that lift. Kind of lifts you up, right? And now this note, F, almost has the same sense of that yielding note. Both of these notes have kind of a yield to them, but this E really wants to go to that F. There's tension here, just like the leading tone of a major scale. Right? Okay? And this wants to go down. I'm sorry. See how that... So I think the more I hear this scale, the more interested I am in it, right? So we have the same, let's get rid of that. We have the same yielding note, that G, but I'm really going to throw in this F as well. And then our go notes, our leading notes, well, let's get rid of that. Use the same size. Right? Really are this note, okay, and this note. And they want to go down. And our resting notes still kind of exist in the same way. And then we have these traveling notes, right? Kind of go back and forth. So let's improvise on that sound a little bit more. And I'm going to try and pull this keyboard over just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to keep playing that drone.